What is up, guys? It's Brandon and Gavin. Back again with the Grain of Salt podcast episode
19.
This is an episode on church hurt and why people are leaving the church at such fast rates and why we need to get them back, guys.
What are we doing, guys? Why are we hurting them?
So listen up, pay attention, let us know how it goes.
You guys settle in, get some popcorn, put your feet up on the table, put some relaxing music on in the background, and
Kick your
lock in.
shoes off just like me.
Enjoy the episode, guys. We love you.
Later. Pain does not stop your purpose. The wrong reaction to pain does.
Nearly 4 out of 10 people who do not regularly attend church avoid it because of negative past experiences. I wrote that church hurt is unmet expectations on a body of imperfect people. And so for these people who are church hurt, I think really what it takes is to really just pour into them. Have an honest conversation like, look, man, I know you had a bad first experience with this. I'm sorry. That's not how it's meant to be. That's not what Jesus intended, because really it's not.
His girl, look, come cry with me. I'm trying to live for the truth. Come die with me. I'm trying to spit in the booth, which your eyes can see. I can't be proud of me and pride of me. Look, Christ like, I'm a love like that. Get slung right back to the sun.
Dude, I don't have shoes on right now. Is that weird?
That's not that weird, but I'm going to take mine off too so that you don't feel all weird.
Okay, so a little sock check for the camera. Yeah, we got socks on today.
I have a question for you.
Oh
So we said we were going to do this, but we never ended up doing it. What has your bench journey been like recently?
Dude, I'm not going to lie. After that video, I have not touched the bench. I've been doing dumbbell benches.
Really?
Just because of my wrists.
Oh, they started to hurt?
Yeah, they started to hurt. Once you get up to 195, let me tell you, man, it hurts your wrist a little.
Oh,
and I don't want to be like one of those gym guys that has like the wrist straps on. No hate to you guys out there. I feel
like once you go over 225, then it's like any type of equipment is acceptable because once you're that strong, it's like you can't make fun of a guy who benches 225, right?
You really can't.
Especially if
you can't.
But if you're doing 170 with wrist straps,
what are you at right now?
I'm glad you asked. I brought this up because recently I PR'd on my bench. I want you to guess.
205?
Look at that. You got it.
No way, dude.
Tell me up.
He's setting himself up for a humble brag, guys. You saw that?
Dude, stop. Maybe.
All right, well, now I want to humble brag. No, I'm kidding. Brandon, I have a question. What's your women life been like lately?
Whoa, that's crazy that you asked that question right now in this time. So, yeah, guys, I have recently gained a girlfriend. Oh my gosh. Yes, she's beautiful, loves Jesus. And
what's the best thing about her? If you could give me one thing.
I would say I would like her laugh a lot.
Ooh.
Also, the thing that I think I like the most about her is how my mom likes her a lot. And she loves my sister.
Super green flag. That's awesome, bro.
Yeah.
I'm very happy for you guys.
How is your lady life?
I need to get some water for this one. Okay.
He went to grab his water.
We got the water right here.
Wait, you just to clear your throat, anything special about this water? Just regular water?
Trader Joe's Italian sparkling mineral water with low mineral count, carbonation added. If we ever do sponsorships, I'm gonna have to get a lot better with speaking. Yeah, my lady life has been good. I actually have 1 month anniversary tomorrow, so
1 month anniversary.
One by fast.
There we go.
Like lightning speed. But yeah, it's been super good, super big blessing.
Guys, my girlfriend and I, very recent, but we're actually long distance. Not crazy long, but 3 hours. So it's like middle long distance. But if any of you guys are defeated out there, like, oh my gosh, I can't date them, or I'm going to break up with them because I live 3 hours away, don't accept that. That's just lies talking to you.
I have some wisdom to point to that also, because I was in a 2,000-mile long distance relationship. If you guys both are chasing after Jesus, then I would not worry. But if you are not secure in who you are as a person and you're not chasing after Jesus, don't expect God to bless that relationship. That's what I'm going to put out there. I think that at the end of the day, for any long distance relationship, that should be like the base. I think that's why most of them just don't go well.
Totally agree. I think it was weird because I remember I was in a relationship in high school, and I definitely thought about, like, I was very doubtful of it, like, even continuing to date this person into when I went to college because of long distance. Mm-hmm. And I started a relationship with somebody starting at long distance.
Ooh.
Like we were long distance before we even started dating. So it's like just a life change. There's clearly some change in my heart.
Yeah.
Like I realized that Jesus is the center.
Well, dude, thanks for sharing. I'm happy for you. Today, guys, we have a not like exciting episode, but an important episode. Relatable. I'm sure that any person listening to this in one way or another is going to be able to relate to this episode. So, just a little opening statement here. I love giving little like facts. So, nearly 4 out of 10 people who do not regularly attend church avoid it because of negative past experiences. That's 37%.
Yeah, I was about to say I found a stat that said the same exact thing.
Oh.
And another stat that goes along with that. Christianity, from a church-to-church basis. Oh my gosh, I'm tired right now. And take a deep breath. From a church-to-church basis, was the fastest growing and fastest declining, leaving religion. Not to say that they're not Christian anymore, but to say that they switch churches or they leave a specific church.
Interesting. I didn't know that part.
Because the statistic the statistic is not that people are becoming less Christian, but that they're leaving their churches at a higher rate than, say, a Muslim or a Jew is leaving their temple or mosque.
Okay. So that's interesting because like if you look at like a business standpoint, like let's say you're a car manufacturer or something. If you have cars and you have customers, if one customer has a bad experience with you and your establishment, odds are they're going to go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And the faster you grow, the more room for error, because of the more customers you have, the more people have the opportunity to leave.
It's actually I didn't even think about that type of analogy. It's a very good analogy because it's different. Okay, obviously different for different search situations and different people. It's very unique. But if the product you're searching for is Jesus, then when you become affected by church hurt, which let me explain what church hurt is first. Forgot to explain that.
Do you mind if I actually wrote down like a little thing that I thought describes church hurt, and I think it's going to be perfect.
Go ahead.
So I wrote that church hurt is unmet expectations on a body of imperfect people.
That's perfect definition. So if you're affected by church hurt, it depends on what you're shopping for, basically. If you're shopping for the love of Jesus Christ, if you're given bad community and bad responses from the public, you're going to search for new people, search for other people related to God. Whereas if you're searching for a community and for the religion aspect of it, you're just going to be pushed away from it as a whole.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So you got to make sure your priorities are straight and that you're looking for Jesus and not for community.
Yeah, I so agree with that. So I actually wanted to kind of open this whole thing up with a verse that is Ephesians 4:32. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ, God, forgave you. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to talk about personal experience right now, because most of my friends who aren't religious or who claim that they have been hurt by the church in the past, the number one reason that they've given me for their turnoff of church is hypocrisy. And I think like when you look at church hurt as a whole, we've already established church hurt is unmet expectations on a body of imperfect people. I want to break down that whole thing that I just said. So unmet expectations. The unmet expectations that some people experience is that Christians won't XYZ. And what I mean by this is like, if I'm looking at someone who claims to be Christian, in my mind, I have this idea that they're going to be holier in a way. And so this XYZ blanket statement I just said, Christians won't blank. Well, you say you're a Christian, in my mind, that means you're not going to gossip. If you're a Christian, you're not going to judge. If you're a Christian, you're not going to slander. If you're a Christian, you're not going to sin. And there's all these XYZ blanket statements you could use to fill that in. Christians won't blank. But for me, I believe that church hurt is this idea that, so we have unmet expectations. It's the idea of someone doing something differently than what you think they'll do. and then holding these Christians to a higher standard than what they naturally are. They're mortal humans who inevitably are going to mess up and live by the flesh, and in turn, this will hurt others' views on Christianity.
Yeah, you bring up good points. Gavin, could you ask me how to avoid church hurt?
How do you avoid church hurt?
Well, I'm glad you asked. I think that there's many ways to avoid church hurt, but I put it into 3 kind of steps. The first is to become educated and seek the knowledge of the Lord and grow in your own discernment. You should not be learning everything you know about God through the mouth of someone else. Secondly...
Wait, you mind if I add something to that real quick?
Yeah.
Guys, that's the number one reason our podcast is called Grain of Salt. So you take what we're saying with a grain of salt. It's like we don't want you to just take everything we're saying as truth. We want you guys to go do your own research and establish your own logical conclusions from that. Not to just blindly accept what we or maybe other pastors or other people that are pouring into are saying. Because there's power in like your own research and believing why you believe the things you believe in.
Yeah, exactly. Like our theoretical analysis of the Bible doesn't make it the truth. Right?
Right. Like there's people out there that believe full-heartedly in things like, example, flat earth.
Yeah.
And if you go listen to the flat earthers who talk about the earth is flat, well, maybe it's not, you know? So
like we're not claiming that we know the truth because only God knows the truth, but we are claiming our own opinions on how God has affected our lives and what he has spoken to us metaphorically. Now that was point 1, to seek out education, gain your discernment, and look to multiple sources. Secondly, look for a community that is more worried about what God is doing in their life than what others are doing in their own life.
what do you mean by that?
If you are at a church that's particularly bad when it comes to the topic of gossip, or when you go to a church and there are more conversations being had about, so-and-so did this to this person, so they're like a worse Christian for this, or Gavin did this to Zane, so he's doing this wrong, like people who are condemning others of their sins, rather than being more worried about what God has to say about it. Right?
Yeah.
Because you could find people who know what the Bible says, but not care about what God is telling them to do.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Like, the only kind of church hurt I would say I've experienced is when I was part of youth group. And I don't want to discredit youth group because a lot of my friends actually, this is where they've experienced a church hurt, is from like the youth group. Because like obviously the youth group is consisted of like the high school aged like students that go. And like, bro, when you're in high school, like you're probably the most imperfect that you'll ever be.
People,
like
yeah.
where a lot of change is going on, a lot of like voices are consuming you at that time. And so like I was definitely a victim of that hurt sometimes from those cliques and friend groups and that. But like you got to realize, as we're going to discuss, like you can't depend on like the people in the church, kind of like you're talking about.
Exactly, because people aren't dependable. God is.
Exactly. They're always, if you always put your trust in man, 10 out of 10 times it will fail you.
10 out of 10 is kind of crazy, but you have no reliability basically.
You know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. So that was the second point. Search for a community. Actively seek out community. After having the discernment of between right and wrong in your own life, then you will know whether this is the right community or not. You can't just accept that all communities are the same.
Yeah.
Thirdly, or lastly, try to have a forgiving mind. This is where your thing came in.
Yeah.
Try to have a forgiving mindset. When it comes to speaking with, quote unquote, people of God, sometimes we have a prejudice toward people of God because they are supposed to be perfect. And they are also humans. If you are seeking help, don't just rely on a couple of people. Reach out to a lot of sources. Just like you were saying, like it happens to me sometimes, and people that I look up to, I mean, my brain also thinks like this. They'll look at me or I'll look at someone else, and they'll see me doing something that they deem as sin, or in the world's eye views as not acceptable.
Yeah.
And they see that, and then they just kind of have this negative viewpoint on that person, and then because that person, quote unquote, resembles God, they have a negative viewpoint on the church, which in itself is church hurt. having a negative viewpoint on somebody who is a person of God is a form of church hurt.
Yeah.
Because that always, when they ask you, like, why don't you like the church, and they say hypocrisy, they're talking about that person, whether you might not know it or not. Maybe you don't even know them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, and then also reach out to multiple sources, because I've heard plenty of stories where there are good churches. I think that one of the biggest reasons people have church hurt is from negligence, I'd say.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people will see themselves as being forgotten or not cared for. So if you go to reach out for help and you get denied or ignored or not seen, they overlook you, then you're like, oh, wow, this church really isn't what they say they are. They're supposed to be there for me. But you have to have some sort of sympathy and understand that they are just human. They're not perfect people. And that's why you always have God. There's always someone there for you. But God gives us community. So never stop trying. Once you have this understanding of God, you can understand that you should reach out to multiple people.
Yeah.
Don't just rely. This is why you can't just take everything with a grain of salt. Because if you become hung up on this one pastor, you know how they say don't meet your idols? Like never meet your idols, because they'll disappoint you every time.
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
If your idol or this person that you think is the most heavenly person ever is your pastor, and you go to, this happens a lot of times with pastors, because people look up to pastors. You go to like a mega church, or we'll say just like a bigger church. That doesn't mean they're a bad church. Like I went to a church this summer, very big church, but you could tell that the community was good and they were truly striving for Jesus. And I guarantee you that pastors' DMs and like text messages are flooded with like wanting motivation and stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure he's not going to have enough time to personally talk and speak with all of them in their timeline.
Yeah.
So sometimes he refers them to other people. But by seeing that, some people take that as negligence, like, oh, he doesn't really care about the people, right? So you just have to keep in mind that we're all human and not everything's, possible.
Do you think there's like an idolization with the church nowadays?
Hold up. Are they trying to? Oh. Never mind. What was your question?
Do you think there's like an idolization of the modern church today? Like, do you think people idolize the church?
I don't know about so much to say a church, but I do think pastors for sure, and certain people like influencers, for sure. Which I just think is bad. I think that you should be searching for your own ideas and not just the information that you get from a pastor. What do you think about that?
I guess I agree with you. I don't think like it's more like the people involved in these churches are becoming idols, and I think you can honestly like I think it's a 50-50 exchange. I think some of these pastors are getting less humble, and some of these people listening to them are becoming more like, or they're idolizing these pastors more, and that exchange of idolization and the loss of humbleness is definitely putting these people on a pedestal for sure. And like another reason why that's so dangerous is because like let's say your pastor who you've idolized so much does mess up, does slip up. Because you've idolized him so much at that point, it's really just going to put you in just such a sour taste in your mouth of that church and of that person.
Yeah, I agree with that. When it comes to church hurt, what do you think, what would your advice be to somebody who is experiencing church hurt and has a sort of animosity to somebody in the church? Or the church itself? What would you say to them?
All right, I'm going to kind of deviate from that. I'll answer that in a second, but kind of to lead into that. So Paul actually kind of writes about this. Yeah, you might drink some of that. Paul actually kind of writes about this in 2 Corinthians. I want to give the right context of the verse. So in 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Paul is writing to a church that is experiencing a little bit of hardship, and they need help, they need guidance. And so Paul is writing to a church, which makes me think that if Paul is writing to a church, we look at these letters and we establish them as things that we should be doing in our churches today. And what Paul says, 2 Corinthians 5:20, it says, we are ambassadors for Christ. The definition of an ambassador is a person who acts as a representative or promoter for a specified activity. And so in these churches, the people in these churches aren't just people serving God and serving you. They're active ambassadors for Jesus Christ. And how do we first, and before we answer the question of how do we like fix that church hurt, let's talk about how we can avoid that church hurt. We really, like, as these people, like, our ambassador is a huge title. And if we are involved in this church, we need to take that seriously and really live actively with integrity in every situation. That means whether people are watching or not. And like, it's really difficult to do. And yes, we're going to fail sometimes because of our flesh, because we're not perfect. But if we lived with that idea in mind, I think it would really solve this big epidemic movement of like people really getting hurt by the church all over. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you bring up the ambassadors, and I think it's a good point to bring up. You're gonna have to repeat the last thing you said, but you said ambassadors. When I think of church hurt, I don't think of the ambassadors. I do in a sense, but I don't think of them as the ones being hurt.
I'm saying the ambassadors are the one hurting other people.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm getting to that point.
Okay.
But like for you and me, I would say that you and me are ambassadors of. We don't go to the same church, but I guess no, we don't. Kind of. Yeah, sometimes we do, but we're both ambassadors for the Church of Jesus Christ. Just we don't, even though we don't go to the same church,
right.
We're both ambassadors of the church. And if you were to be like Jesus and the Pharisees, like Jesus, the Pharisees were these religious people, and they were like wanting to stone Jesus. Like they are like physically about to hurt Jesus. Like they're like extreme case of church hurt is happening to Jesus himself because they didn't think that what Jesus was saying was right.
Right.
It's like since we have sought out God and God has found us, if we experience church hurt, we'll leave the church, but we're still in the church of Jesus. Right? So you need to start thinking about being in the church not as a physical thing, but as a people, as the people of Jesus are the church.
I agree with that. And like back to what I was saying about that, like I so agree with that. Like being ambassador for a church is just half of it. You're literally being an ambassador for Christ 24/7. And you're always like, Christians are always going to be judged a little more. We're going to be held to a higher standard because we should be acting differently. We should be living our lives out differently. And when we're not, that's when the views of hypocrisy start to come in. And that's what really Satan can use to work against us and against our God, because we're being poor examples of how we should be living out. And I think you put that very well said. And so I have a few verses here that I've written down, but back to this idea of the unmet expectation, I think frustration is unmet expectation. I think these people that are like impacted by church hurt aren't just hurt. I think they're frustrated because, like, I mean, back to the example of the car, like, I'm going to this place to be, I'm going, when you go to church, you go for a fill up, you go for a lot of different things. You may be there to serve, but at the end of the day, it's there to benefit you spiritually. So there's a reason why I'm going to this place. And if you're going there and like you're getting hurt, like that's an unmet expectation, you know? Kind of like if I'm going to the car dealership, if I'm going to get an oil change and they break my brakes or something.
Yeah.
Like, so like, I think unmet expectation is really like the biggest cause of everything. And in turn, it's because we aren't actively living out how we should as Christ 24/7. And how do we do this? So I have some verses here just to kind of encourage both parties. Psalm 73:26 says, "My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." Just as a reminder that ultimately we can do nothing without God. Our flesh will always fail us and deceive us. So we should always rely on God for that strength to then turn around and be able to mirror him. I have Proverbs 14:12. "There is a way that seems right to man, but in the end it is the way to death." Once again, that's us following our flesh. And it's just this idea, like when you are hurt and impacted by these people, it's just remembering that they're human. Like if I was to sit there and be upset at someone for hurting me, that's kind of hypocritical because in my life, I've hurt other people as well. We're all hypocrites in a way if we think like that. And so we need to really just learn to have that forgiveness in our heart for them at the end of the day, you know, because no one's perfect.
I agree. And I would just talk about, I think that a reason there's a couple reasons of church hurt leading to the denial of Jesus Christ. That's not the same thing as the metaphor you said, say, going to a car dealership, getting screamed at, and then wanting to go to a different car dealership. That's different because you still want the car being Jesus. I'll say that church hurt shows, one, a lack of faith from the person being hurt.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to necessarily blame that on him because, say, his faith's not as strong. But also the lack of a forgiveful mindset. If you look in the Bible, there's many things that happen. I'm going to read this verse. It says, Romans 12:19, "Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord." Another one, 2 Timothy 4:14, Alexander the coppersmith did me great harm. The Lord will repay him according to his deeds. This basically just says to let go and let God. Like if you are getting hurt by your church, you need to listen to God and let God handle the situation, instead of a form of having vengeance on them is to leave the church and deny Jesus. That is a form of self-revenge. You feel like me not doing this hurts that person because of what they believe. That you're doing it for the wrong reasons, if that's what you're doing.
Also, a little bit of conviction right here. If you are let's say you were hurt by the church, if you're letting that kind of draw a pit between you and God, you're not like getting back at God anyway, or the people that have hurt you. You're actively carrying out Satan's plan, because Satan wants nothing more than for you to be as far away from God as possible. And if you're letting that consume you to the point where it puts a wall between you and God, you're not doing anything out of spite to God. You're just worshiping the devil by doing what he wants you to do. And once again, like we're supposed to be ambassadors for Christ. Like we need to represent him 24/7 in the right ways. And this calls for the forgiveness as well.
Yeah, I right here I have it written. Remember God's forgiveness toward you and extend it to others. I have another one. It says, Pain does not stop your purpose. The wrong reaction to pain does.
Whoa. Is that a Bible? Was this from the Bible?
No, that's just off the dome.
I actually love that. Say that again.
Yeah, it's the idea that pain doesn't stop your purpose. The wrong reaction to pain does. For example,
I love that so much.
Reaction to pain. I am going to church and I ask for help and no one responds to me for 3 months. And my reaction is, I don't believe in Jesus anymore. I'm going to deny Jesus. That is the wrong reaction. The right reaction would be, okay, maybe I need to talk with somebody at the church, or maybe I need to switch churches. Okay? Both things are good options. That would be the right reaction to pain, because those reactions bring you closer to Jesus. Mm-hmm. Right? Imagine you hurt yourself and instead of trying to do the things that healed you, you did the things that harmed you.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing by denying Jesus.
Yeah. That's really good. I love how you said that. So, I know we opened with Ephesians 4:32. But this is kind of cool. I want to read the verse before that, Ephesians 4:31. And I'm going to go right back in Ephesians 4:32. So 4:31 says, "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as in Christ God forgave you." And so I think what God has kind of done here is laid out to us how we give that forgiveness to other people. And it starts with 4:31. Get rid of all bitterness, rage and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. I would categorize these, what are these? What are these bad things I've just said?
What are you talking about?
They're
adjectives?
attributes, adjectives.
Yeah.
I would say that in God's eyes, if we have these, it's hard for us to go and forgive people.
Fruits. We'll say these are the negative fruits.
These negative fruits. And so if you have been affected by church and maybe you want to be able to forgive people, but maybe it's really difficult for you. I get that. but we're called to get rid of the bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling, and slander, along with every form of malice that is inside of us because of those people. And maybe you might be asking, like, how do we do that? Well, first, me and Brandon, like, we're so sorry that you've experienced that church hurt in the past. We know so many people that have experienced it firsthand, and I can see how it genuinely has really hurt a lot of people's faith. But it's really important to remember that, like, we are all sinners, and God literally sent his son to die on the cross for all of us, knowing that we were going to sin against him. Talk about church hurt. Jesus died for us knowing that he was going to be denied by Peter, knowing that he was going to have a crown of thorns, and says, knowing he was going to be nailed to the cross for us, and he still did it for us. That was the ultimate form of forgiveness. And so we're called to forgive others daily just as Christ forgave us. And so when you have that mindset and you can remember that, I feel like it makes it really easy to get rid of all of this bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, and slander, along with every form of malice that exists in our hearts, so that we can turn around, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as in Christ God forgave you.
Exactly. So don't be thinking that Jesus gave up on you. Think that the people gave up on you, because Jesus will never give up on you. I think like another point we could talk about is, we talked about how to avoid church hurt as a person.
Right.
And then I guess the next point we could talk about is how to avoid causing church hurt. So we were talking about we're going to call them lukewarm people.
Yeah.
And now we're going to call these people the ambassadors.
Okay.
This one is more related to the ambassadors. I have another three-part reasoning on how to avoid causing church hurt. I said, first, if you are being sought out for guidance, be empathetic and meaningful in your actions. Keep in mind that it might not be a big deal to you, but it could be a big deal to them. This is kind of how the negligence starts. If someone comes up to me and asks me a question, they might be uncomfortable making it a super serious situation, so they choose to like kind of make it lighthearted, and we might just brush them off and not do it. And that's why in a lot of the stories, they're like, oh, I never knew that you wanted this, right? I didn't know you wanted me to act this way. So
Right.
if we choose to act with sincerity at all times with people asking these types of questions, then church hurt will be avoided, basically. Second step is be intentional with them. Being negligent often causes people to stray away from the church, and building a relationship with them could give them a good example of a Christ-led relationship, showing them how their relationship with God should be valued.
I like that.
Third step, always be mindful of your behavior. Third step, always be mindful of your behavior, the words you say, and your physical behavior. The world has its own set of viewpoints and what is seen as acceptable. And what is seen as acceptable, and also as what is seen unacceptable. And while we are supposed to base our lives off the Bible, you should keep in mind how you may be perceived, because not everyone is as far along in their walk today as others are. So that kind of brings in the idea that there are people out there that are Christian that maybe aren't sinning, but if they're being perceived as hypocrites, it's just as bad to that person perceiving it as if you actually are a hypocrite.
Right.
I'm trying to give an example. I don't know. If we have different cultures, in some places it's rude to introduce yourself a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
In certain cultures, you kiss each other's cheeks to greet each other. Like if you're a salesman in the U.S. and you were to kiss their cheeks, like some
I'd be
people
like,
are gonna
"Yo,
be
what?"
like, "Yo, that's really bad. That's sexual assault or something like that."
Yeah.
So we don't know how we're being perceived because different cultures believe in different things. Just like an atheist would have a different viewpoint on certain things than a Christian. Just how somebody who's their path of sanctification has been going on for years versus somebody who's new.
Yeah.
So it's important to know the world's viewpoint as well as God's viewpoint.
And it's really interesting you say that, because like a lot of people I've talked to that like are newer in their faith are really turned off by people who seem to be very knowledgeable. It's like you gotta like know how to approach and talk to the people even when they're new to make them comfortable, like you said.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend, I won't say his name, but it definitely used to give off the vibes that he didn't really enjoy talking to me, because I would always start talking like not ranting, but I would speak a lot about the Bible because I'm very passionate about it. but sometimes he would take it negatively because he realizes that he doesn't know as much as me empirically.
Yeah.
So he kind of gets annoyed by that. It's just like a human nature. Like, oh, okay, dude, you're smarter than me. Like, you can stop talking now. Like, let me talk, which is obviously a negative trait of mine. Like, it is good to listen. And sometimes what they need is not the stats and the words that are out of the Bible, but they need someone to show the love of God through their actions and not their words. But there's obviously a middle ground.
Have you ever experienced church hurt before or no?
I can't say I have. I think the church has been wonderful to me ever since I was a kid. I can't say I have, but I do know of people that have come back to church, and there are these 3 kids, and they just grew up in a rough lifestyle, and their church would put restrictions on them because they would have like outbursts and stuff, which is not a bad thing. Like, you shouldn't let crazy things happen just in the church. There should be some rules. But people wouldn't really look out for them in like a personal level. They would just say like, hey, there's other people here trying to learn, and just kind of neglected them as people. They're just like, oh, you're the ones causing the problem, so we're not even going to ask for your how are you doing. It's more like, why are you doing this, not how are you doing as a person. Right. But those same people met this person who is no longer in their lives, but he pursued them in a relationship with them, and those people now love Jesus, and they act differently in the church, not because this person fixed them, but because this person showed the love of God, and through that, God seeped into their hearts. And all of those problems that the quote-unquote the church was hurting them with, saying like, oh, you're a bad kid, you're impulsive, you're angry, you're this and that, this person showed God's love, and then they accepted it through him.
Wow.
So that's how they handled that church hurt, which I think is amazing. Yeah. But yeah. Do you have any stories about church hurt?
Not really church. Maybe like a little. Like, my friends and I have been going to this church here in Boca for like a minute, like since we got here in college. And there was one service where they had like a guest speaker come, and really just the spirits of discernment went off, and it was just like not biblical at all. And when that happened, a lot of like people I went to that church with me immediately were very quick to judge and be like, we're not going here anymore. And very shortly after that, they were just hopping around looking for new churches. And I kind of like was with them at the beginning, but as I had time to reflect, I realized like, dude, not every church is perfect. The lead pastor came out and apologized for it. He made a statement. And while I don't agree with the other lead speaker that spoke, like, that was one person, and the church as a whole, like, they didn't support it, they denounced it, and then they asked for forgiveness for it. So for me to just sit there and like be like, okay, I'm not going to go to this church anymore, because that would be very hypocritical of me. And, you know, I kind of had to check myself there a little, because that's not right for me to do, you know?
I agree with you.
And so it's not like my home church, but I do go there frequently still, just because I love the messages. I love the vibe. It's very similar to my home church back in Tampa, but I would say it's the one I associate most with here, you know? I'm not going to let one bad experience dismay me or persuade me away from going.
That's interesting. What would you say? So we were talking about, I was thinking about this. We were talking about church hurt and how you're doing like Satan's work. But what happens if that person doesn't want, their faith wasn't in God to begin with? So now they have a reason not to even pursue God to start with. Like, how would you say we should handle that? That's not like, we're not trying to avoid causing church hurt. We're not trying to avoid church hurt. We're trying to reconcile people who have been church hurt.
See, that's what's difficult. It's like, if you're interested in like a new hobby or something, you have a bad experience with it, and it kind of really is like, sets the tone for you. I'm like, not doing this. Like, let's say you want to get into rock climbing. Let's say it just goes so terribly, and you're like, all right, I'm for sure not doing this. You were interested before, but now it's like a brick wall. I mean, when I think about that, it's like, you don't really go back to that unless you're pulled there by people or you have a reason to go. And so for these people who are church hurt, I think really what it takes for us as people is to like really just pour into them. And kind of like we're doing now, have an honest conversation. Like, look, man, I know you had a bad first experience with this. I'm sorry. That's not how it's meant to be. That's not what Jesus intended. Because really it's not, you know. And do your best to apologize to them for the hurt that they've experienced. And, you know, all you can really do is plant those seeds. We're not called to grow them. All we can really do is plant and water. And what kind of went back to what you asked about, like, Satan's will for us or whatever, like, I think we can carry out Satan's will in our lives without realizing it or not. It's really just stems from, are we actively doing what the devil wants us to without realizing? And I think that does fall under that. Like Satan wants nothing for us more than to separate us eternally from God. And how he achieves that is like through a lot of things, like through tempting us, through making us go down the path, or making us stray away from the path that God wants us to stay on, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think my response to my own question, it does kind of tie in with avoiding church hurt, but in the same way that we have to remember that to avoid being church hurt, you have to have a forgiveful mindset and remember that they're just human. We need to remember that they're just human and that God gave them their brain and that everyone is unique.
Oh, that's really good.
It's this idea of sonder. It's this word that means, it's like when you're driving down the highway and someone cuts you off. And you're like, wow, like you almost killed me, and you're cursing and doing all this crazy stuff. And that person's probably just like, oh, dang, like I just cut that person off. Or just like, dude, why is he like flipping me off or something? It's the idea of recognizing that everyone has unique lives and that everyone is their own protagonist.
Oh, SONDER, Sonder?
Yeah.
I saw a really cool TikTok about that the other day.
Yeah, it's like the idea that everyone is their own protagonist.
Right.
So you can't just act like you're the center of the world. You need to...
Oh, you can't rewrite another person's story.
Yep.
When they're the main character.
Like you have to always come at a situation knowing that you're a side character.
Yeah.
And that the only person else in their life that needs to be a protagonist is Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But in that sense, I would say Erin, the girl who we had on our podcast last week, she spoke on having church hurt from the Catholic Church. And I would say that nowadays she is like healed from that church hurt. She has plenty of Christian friends.
Right.
Goes to church sometimes and is not like pushed away from Christians. We asked her, what's your experience with Christians? She said, nothing bad. Right? But if it had just been that, if all of her memories were from when she was a kid in the Catholic Church, she probably would have said something differently.
And like, have you heard the idea of like sometimes we're the only Jesus people ever see?
Yeah, like we're the only Bible some people ever read.
Yeah, like some people might not ever talk to Jesus, might not know what that relationship looks like until they interact with people like us. And so kind of like back to the answer I gave, it's like I think it really stems from how during that time when they are experiencing that church or after, how those Christians do come around and alongside them and really support them and uplift them during that time. And I think if they don't have those people, it's going to be really hard to get pulled back into that, you know, if they have no one pouring into them at all. So like if we do know someone that's experienced church hurt, I think it's important to do our best to communicate with them, to apologize for what they felt through other people, to be there and be a Jesus to them in a way, not to be their savior, but to be an example to them.
And also put your feelings to the side. This happens a lot in relationships. They say, oh, I'm being the bigger person. If someone is church hurt and you disagree, you're like, oh, no, you're not church hurt. You're just not a good Christian. That happens a lot. And that person, because they have a different viewpoint on something, is hurt from that person discrediting their feelings. Just like in relationships, something bad happens. Your girlfriend says, you did this to me. I need you to say sorry to me. You're like, I'm not going to say sorry because I think what I did was right. Oh, I'm not going to show God's love to you because I think that no one hurt your feelings. You have insufficient reasons for why you're church hurt.
Right.
So you need to always be the bigger person, and it's not about what you feel is right. It's about how they feel about God.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Don't discredit someone's feelings.
Yeah, that's all I got.
That's all I got.
Well, you know what? I was thinking we need to redo our bench off.
We can redo it. Now I want to like train. I'm like,
I think it'd be a lot closer now. But you've been getting bigger.
Wait, actually?
Yeah, you posted like a back photo recently. You get a new
Oh.
tattoo?
Oh, yeah, guys. I got a new tattoo. Can't really see it.
It says 2004.
04. I bet you guys can't guess what that is.
Guess what? That's when his son was born.
It's the year I was born. Yeah, my son was born 2004.
Yeah, he's actually 47.
I'm like Hezbollah.
I did not know that kid was
20 something.
he's
30?
old. I literally thought he was a baby for the first year. I was like, this kid is like the smartest kid I've ever seen.
It's like, who's this baby that's blown up
And since,
everywhere?
isn't he like Russian?
Yeah.
Since he spoke a different language, I just thought he was being a bit like speaking baby language. I didn't know.
Oh, but yeah. I think that was a good episode.
Yeah. Let us know. Give us feedback. You know, if we're being buffoons, please enlighten us. If we said something very wise, let us know.
Also, if you're that person in the YouTube comments that keeps asking us for the one camera angle, this was for you. One camera angle. So also, yeah, feedback. If you guys have feedback, you guys have requests for the lights are too bright, if we're speaking too much to the mics, if I'm breathing too much into the mic, which I'm sorry, I definitely am, let us know, please. Because we want to get 1% better each episode.
Also,
if
you want to come on, DM us, text us, comment to us. We'll try to get you on.
Yep.
But yeah, this has been an amazing
This
episode.
has been episode 19, Church Hurt. I'm Gavin.
I'm Brandon.
And until next week, guys, this is the Grain of Salt Podcast, the number one podcast that you should
Should
take
take
with a grain of salt. We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.
Peace out.